What if the person you dismiss as just the janitor is secretly a genius? When Clara Ramirez, a talented student at an elite academy, is targeted and humiliated by a prejudiced teacher, she finds herself at a breaking point. But her father, the school's quiet custodian, holds a secret that will not only restore her confidence, but also expose shocking truths about intelligence, privilege, and the true meaning of academic excellence. This is the story of how a brilliant father and daughter took on a system designed to keep people like them out. Hello, dear, trust you're good. I warmly urge you to listen and watch till the very end and give this story a rating out of 10. When you rate, it helps me tell you more intriguing stories subsequently. If you're new to my channel, kindly subscribe and press the bell icon so that you are notified of my next stories. Thank you. Now let's begin. The whiteboard marker squeaked against the smooth surface as Clara Ramirez's hand, sticky with nervous sweat, hovered over the complex elliptic curve problem. 27 pairs of young, expectant eyes watched her, their silence amplifying the pressure in the meticulously designed advanced mathematics classroom of Granada Heights Academy. With its high ceilings, modern art, and busts of historical figures, it felt less like a place of learning and more like an intimidating gallery. Well, Miss Ramirez, we're all waiting. Ms. Evelyn Vance's voice, sharp as a freshly sharpened pencil, cut through the tension. The 55-year-old department head stood with her arms crossed, her perfectly styled silver bob rigid as her posture. Her gaze, cool and appraising, was fixed on Clara. Clara's mind went blank. She'd spent hours on this material, but under Ms. Vance's piercing stare, every axiom and theorem seemed to vanish. Her hand trembled, and the marker slipped from her fingers, clattering loudly to the floor. That's what I thought, Ms. Vance stated, her lips curling into a semblance of a smile that never quite reached her cold blue eyes. Class, this is precisely what occurs when we compromise our standards. Some students simply lack the intrinsic aptitude for advanced theoretical mathematics. The emphasis on intrinsic aptitude was not lost on anyone. Liam O'Connell, whose family owned a chain of luxury hotels, snickered from the front row. A few other students shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared speak. Perhaps, Miss Ramirez, you should consider a more foundational mathematics class, Ms. Vance continued, pacing slowly towards Clara like a hawk circling its prey. This program is designed for students from families who inherently value rigorous intellectual pursuits, students whose parents understand the importance of abstract thinking. Not everyone is destined for this caliber of education. Clara's eyes burned with unched tears. She wanted to retort that her father valued education more than anyone she knew, that he stayed up late helping her with homework after working grueling 14-hour shifts. But her throat had completely seized. I presented a university-level cryptography problem to illustrate a point, Ms. Vance declared to the class. Natural genius cannot be forced. It's often inherited. Her gaze swept over the predominantly affluent faces before returning to Clara. You may sit down now, Miss Ramirez, though I'm not sure why you bothered standing. The walk back to her seat felt like an endless journey. Clara kept her head down, but she could feel everyone's stare. Sophia Perez, her closest friend, reached out to squeeze her hand, but Clara pulled away. She couldn't break down here. Not in front of everyone. Not in front of her. The rest of the class passed in a blur of equations and theorems that Clara couldn't focus on. Ms. Vance called on Liam 3 times, praising his innate understanding and excellent mathematical lineage each time he answered correctly, even though Clara noticed he'd made a fundamental error in his second response that Ms. Vance either missed or chose to ignore. When the bell finally rang, Clara was the first one out the door. She sprinted down the hallway, her treasured leather shoes, a birthday gift from her father, who'd saved for months to buy them, clattering against the polished marble floors. She needed to escape, to find somewhere safe where she could finally let the tears fall. She rounded the corner and nearly collided with a custodian's cart. Looking up, she saw the one person who could make everything better. "Whoa there, Mija," Santiago Ramirez said, his deep voice warm with concern. His custodial uniform was neat and pressed, as always, and his kind brown eyes immediately registered his daughter's distress. At 53, Santiago possessed a quiet dignity that made even his work clothes appear distinguished. "What's wrong, Papa?" Clara whispered, and that was all she managed before the tears finally came. Santiago quickly guided her into a disused storage room, away from the scrutinizing eyes of Granada Heights Academy. He knelt, his knees protesting after years of physical labor, and pulled his daughter into a hug that smelled of industrial cleaning solution and the cinnamon gum he always chewed. "Tell me everything," he said softly. And Clara did. She recounted the elliptic curve problem, Ms. Vance's cruel words, how everyone had seemed to mock her. She told him how stupid and small she felt, how maybe Ms. Vance was right. Maybe she didn't belong among the children of prominent doctors, lawyers, and business magnates. Santiago listened in silence, his jaw tightening with each word. When Clara finished, he was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with an internal struggle. Finally, he pulled back and looked his daughter in the eyes. "Clara Ramirez," he said firmly, "you belong here just as much as anyone else. More so because you've had to fight for it. That woman doesn't know what she's talking about." "But, Papa, she's the head of the mathematics department. She has 2 master's degrees from prestigious universities. She knows. She knows how to make herself feel superior by stepping on others," Santiago interrupted, something flashing in his eyes that Clara had never seen before. "Trust me on this, Maija. Trust your old man." Santiago held his daughter until her tears subsided, his mind racing with memories he'd buried for years. The storage room smelled of lemon disinfectant and floor wax, a stark contrast to the lecture halls and research libraries that had once defined his world. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a clean handkerchief, a habit from his former life he'd never quite shaken. "Papa," Clara said, her voice still shaky. "Ms. Vance showed us this problem. She said it was university-level elliptic curve cryptography that none of us should be able to solve, but she made me try anyway in front of everyone." "What was the problem?" Santiago asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Clara pulled out her notebook and sketched it from memory. Santiago recognized it instantly, a variant of a problem he used in his advanced cryptography seminars at ETH Zurich before everything fell apart. Before the budget cuts, before the committee decided that, despite his PhD in applied mathematics and dozen published papers on number theory and secure communication, he wasn't quite the right fit for their prestigious department. "This," Santiago said softly, "this isn't as hard as she made it seem. She's using intimidation, not education." He looked at his daughter's tear-stained face and made a decision that would change everything. "What if I told you I could teach you to solve this? Not just this problem, but ones far more complex." Clara looked at him skeptically. "Papa, no offense, but you didn't go to college, right? That's what you always said." Santiago had never lied to his daughter. Not exactly. He just let her assume. It was easier than explaining how a PhD could end up pushing a mop. Easier than admitting that sometimes brilliance wasn't enough if it came in the wrong package. But now, seeing her faith in herself shattered by that woman's prejudice, he couldn't stay silent. "Clara, there's something I need to tell you, but you have to promise me something first. This stays between us. Nobody at this school can know. Promise me." The seriousness in his tone made Clara straighten up. "I promise, Papa." Santiago took a deep breath. "I did go to college. In fact, I have a doctorate in applied mathematics from ETH Zurich. I taught at the University of Salamanca for 6 years. I've published 12 papers on number theory and cryptographic algorithms." Clara's mouth fell open. "What? But why are you cleaning floors?" Santiago finished with a sad smile. "It's a long story, Maija. One involving budget cuts, departmental politics, and people like Ms. Vance, who couldn't believe a Romani man from Sacramento belonged in their ivory tower. When I lost my position, your mother was sick. We had medical bills, and I needed steady work with good insurance. Granada Heights had an opening, and they didn't care about my education, just that I could clean. Why didn't you ever tell me?" Clara whispered, hurt creeping into her voice. "Because I wanted you to be proud of me for who I am, not what degrees I have. A man's worth isn't in his titles, Clara. But now, seeing what that teacher is doing to you, I can't stand by and watch her destroy your confidence the way people like her destroyed my career. Clara threw her arms around him again. You're the smartest person I know, Papa. Degree or no degree. So, Santiago said, pulling back with a small smile. Do you want to learn real mathematics? Not the kind that's about showing off or putting people down, but the kind that opens up the universe? Yes, Clara said without hesitation. Then we'll need to be careful. After school, after I finish my main rounds, there's an old science lab in the abandoned West Wing that nobody uses after 6 p.m. We can work there, but remember, nobody can know. But Papa, why can't people know? You're brilliant. Santiago's face grew serious. Because right now, my invisibility is our advantage. Ms. Vance sees a janitor, someone beneath her notice. That blindness will be her downfall. But if she knew the truth, she'd find a way to stop us. Maybe even get me fired. I need this job, mind ya. It's what keeps a roof over our heads and you in this school. Over the next hour, hidden in that storage room, Santiago began teaching his daughter the way he'd once taught university students. He broke down the complex elliptic curve problem into manageable pieces, using analogies and visual representations that made the abstract concrete. He showed her how mathematics was a language, and like any language, it could be learned by anyone willing to listen. The points on this curve, he explained, sketching on a piece of paper towel, think of them like notes in a melody. When you add them, you're creating harmony, a new point on the same tune. Elliptic curve cryptography uses this elegant structure to create unbreakable codes. Ms. Vance makes it seem mysterious, but it's just describing mathematical relationships. Clara's eyes lit up with understanding. Oh, so when we're applying the scalar multiplication, we're essentially repeating the addition, making the melody longer and more complex, harder to reverse. Exactly. Santiago beamed with pride. You just understood in 5 minutes what took my ETA Zurich students a week to grasp. Clara beamed, but then her smile faltered. Papa, Ms. Vance announced today that there's going to be a surprise test next week. She looked right at me when she said it. I think she's trying to prove I don't belong. Then we'll make sure you're ready, Santiago said firmly. Let me show you something I call the Ramirez Principle, a problem-solving approach I developed during my doctoral thesis. It's never been published, so Ms. Vance won't recognize it, but it'll help you solve complex problems twice as fast as traditional methods. As he began explaining his innovative approach, neither of them noticed the shadow that briefly passed by the door's small window. Ms. Vance, staying late to prepare her surprise test designed specifically to humiliate Clara, had taken a wrong turn toward the parking lot. She paused, hearing voices from what should have been an empty classroom. She crept closer, peering through the dusty window. Her eyes widened as she saw the janitor writing complex equations with the ease of a seasoned professor, and his daughter not just keeping up, but actively engaging with material that would challenge her top seniors. For a moment, Ms. Vance considered confronting them immediately. But no, she had a better idea. She would let the girl take the test, and when she inevitably failed, because surely this was just some fluke, some trick, she would have all the ammunition she needed to remove Clara from the advanced program permanently. She slipped away into the darkness, a satisfied smirk on her face. Inside the classroom, Santiago was unaware of their near discovery. He was lost in the joy of teaching again, of watching understanding dawn in his daughter's eyes. Now let's apply this to finite fields, he said, his voice animated with passion. See, numbers behave differently in these structured worlds, but the principles of elliptic curves still hold, creating the secure foundation for modern digital signatures. Like how different languages have different rules, but you can still tell a story. Clara offered. Santiago laughed, a deep, rich sound that echoed in the empty classroom. Exactly. You're thinking like a cryptographer now. They worked for another hour, covering material that spanned from abstract algebra to real-world applications of number theory. Santiago taught her shortcuts he developed, ways of visualizing problems that turned abstract concepts into tangible realities. He shared stories from his teaching days, careful to change names and places, painting a picture of a world where knowledge was valued above all else. Papa, Clara said during a break, sipping the hot chocolate he brought in a thermos. Why don't you try to get another teaching job? You're amazing at this. Santiago's face grew somber. It's not that simple, Maija. After what happened at University of Salamanca, my reputation was complicated. And now, with a decade-long gap in my academic career, most universities wouldn't even look at my application. Besides, he added, trying to lighten the mood, I've got the best student right here. Why would I need a whole classroom? As they packed up for the night, carefully erasing all evidence of their presence, Clara hugged her father tightly. Thank you, Papa, for everything. I actually love math now. Really love it. Not just trying to get good grades. That's all I wanted, Santiago said softly. For you to see the beauty in it that I see. Walking through the empty halls, their footsteps echoing in the silence, they passed Ms. Vance's classroom. Through the open door, they could see her desk, imposing and neat, with a nameplate that seemed to gleam even in the dim security lighting. One day, Clara said quietly, I'm going to solve a problem at that board that'll make her jaw drop. Santiago smiled, but said nothing. He knew his daughter had the ability. She was already working at a level that would impress university professors. But he also knew that people like Evelyn Vance didn't change their minds easily. Prejudice, he'd learned, was often stronger than proof. As they reached the exit, Santiago turned off the lights behind them. Remember, Maija. I know, Papa, our secret. I won't let you down. Driving home in their old but meticulously maintained Seat Ibiza, Santiago watched his daughter in the rearview mirror. She was working through problems in her notebook, using the techniques he taught her, completely absorbed. He thought about his colleagues from ETH Zurich, now department heads and renowned researchers. He thought about the path his life might have taken. But looking at Clara, brilliant and determined, he felt no regret. Maybe this was where he was meant to be all along. Not in a lecture hall teaching hundreds, but in a forgotten classroom, passing on his knowledge to the one student who mattered most. Papa, Clara said suddenly, I've been thinking about what you said about patterns. I think I see one in Ms. Vance's tests. She always includes variations of problems from famous cryptographers or number theorists, but she changes them slightly. If I study the originals. You'll be able to recognize and solve her variations, Santiago finished, pride evident in his voice. That's my girl. You're learning to think strategically, not just mathematically. As they pulled into their modest apartment complex, Santiago knew they were preparing for more than just a test. They were preparing for a confrontation between two worlds, one that valued appearance and pedigree, and one that valued knowledge and determination. The morning of the surprise test arrived with unseasonable warmth for October. Clara walked into Ms. Vance's classroom with a confidence that immediately caught the teacher's attention. Instead of the nervous, defeated posture of recent weeks, Clara held her head high, her notebook tucked under her arm, a slight smile playing at her lips. Well, class, Ms. Vance announced, her voice cutting through the morning chatter. I hope you've all been keeping up with your studies. Today's examination will separate those who truly belong in advanced mathematics from those who don't. Her gaze lingered on Clara just long enough to make her meaning clear. Liam O'Connell turned in his seat to smirk at Clara, confident in his twice-a-week private tutoring sessions with a University of Madrid graduate student his father employed. You have 90 minutes, Ms. Vance continued, distributing the papers face down. This test contains problems from multiple mathematical disciplines. Some of you may recognize them as variations of classical theorems. Others, another pointed look at Clara, will likely find them impossible. When the signal came to begin, Clara turned over her paper and almost smiled. Her father had been right. Ms. Vance was predictable. The first problem was a variation of Dirichlet's theorem on arithmetic progressions, disguised with unnecessary complexity. The second drew from Euler's totient function as applied in RSA cryptography. The third was pure group theory, though wrapped in elaborate word problems related to encryption keys. Clara began writing, her pen moving with fluid certainty. She employed her father's Ramirez principle, breaking each problem into components, identifying the underlying patterns, and solving with an elegance that would have impressed any mathematician. She included all her work, showing each step clearly, even adding annotations explaining her reasoning, something her father had insisted upon. Always show them your thinking, Santiago had said. Never give them room to claim you didn't understand. Around her, she could hear other students struggling. Liam O'Connell kept clearing his throat nervously. Sofia Perez was erasing frantically. Even Maria Sanchez, usually the class's top performer, seemed puzzled by question 4, but Clara moved through the problems like a conductor through a familiar symphony. Problem 6 was based on the discrete logarithm problem on elliptic curves, ambitious for a high school teacher to include, but Santiago had spent an entire evening explaining the concept, knowing Ms. Vance's tendency toward mathematical showboating. 45 minutes in, Clara set down her pen. She had completed all 10 problems, each solution thorough and precise. She reviewed her work once, then twice, checking for any errors that might give Ms. Vance ammunition. Finding none, she stood and walked to the front of the classroom. The room went silent. No one had ever finished one of Ms. Vance's surprise tests in under an hour, let alone 45 minutes. "Sit down, Miss Ramirez," Ms. Vance said coldly. "The test isn't over." "Unfinished, Ms. Vance," Clara replied calmly, placing her paper on the desk. Ms. Vance's eyes narrowed. She grabbed the paper, certain she'd find it either blank or filled with nonsense. Her expression shifted from smugness to confusion to something approaching alarm as she scanned through the solutions. Not only were they correct, they were sophisticated, using methods she'd never seen before, approaches that were undeniably brilliant. "Sit down," she repeated, her voice harder now. Everyone continued working. For the remainder of the test period, Ms. Vance stared at Clara's paper, her face growing redder with each passing minute. When time was finally called and other students turned in their papers with expressions of defeat, Ms. Vance stood abruptly. "Class dismissed," she announced. "Except for you, Miss Ramirez. Stay behind." As the other students filed out, Liam O'Connell whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Guess someone's finally getting expelled." When they were alone, Ms. Vance held up Clara's test paper like evidence in a trial. "You cheated." Clara blinked, genuinely surprised. "I'm sorry. This work." Ms. Vance waved the paper. "This is graduate-level mathematics. The methodology here, I've never even seen some of these approaches. You expect me to believe that you, the daughter of a janitor, suddenly developed revolutionary mathematical techniques." "I studied," Clara said simply. "I worked hard. And don't lie to me." Ms. Vance slammed the paper on her desk. "Someone gave you these answers. Someone did this work for you. Was it online? Did you pay someone? Or did you somehow get access to my answer key?" She paused, her eyes glinting. "Though even my answer key doesn't have solutions this elaborate." "Ms. Vance, I can prove I understand this. Give me any problem, and I'll solve it right now in front of you." "Oh, you're clever," Ms. Vance sneered. "You memorized the solutions, didn't you? Someone coached you. But memorization isn't understanding, Miss Ramirez, and I will not have a cheater in my classroom." She grabbed a red pen and wrote a large F on the paper, followed by "Academics Dishonesty" in capital letters. "I'm reporting this to Director Diaz immediately," Ms. Vance declared. "Academic dishonesty is grounds for immediate expulsion from Granada Heights Academy. You should start packing your things." Clara felt her world tilting. "Ms. Vance, please, I didn't cheat. Test me on anything." "The test is over, Miss Ramirez, and so is your time at this school." Ms. Vance walked to her computer and began typing what was clearly a formal complaint. "I knew from day one that you didn't belong here. Students like you always think you can take shortcuts, that you can fool the system. But mathematics doesn't lie." "You're right," Clara said quietly, finding her voice. "Mathematics doesn't lie, but you do." Ms. Vance's head snapped up. "What did you say?" "Problem 3, on your test, you claimed it was your original problem, but it's from Serge Lang's 1987 paper on Diophantine approximations. Problem 7 is a variation of a puzzle from the 1998 International Mathematical Olympiad. You're accusing me of cheating when half your test is copied from other sources." The silence that followed was deafening. Ms. Vance's face went from red to purple. Get out, she hissed. Get out of my classroom. By tomorrow morning, you'll be out of this school. Clara gathered her things with as much dignity as she could muster. At the door, she turned back. My father always says that prejudice is just ignorance dressed in authority. Thank you for proving him right. She left before Ms. Vance could respond, but she could hear the crash of something being thrown against the door behind her. Santiago was replacing a light fixture in the art wing when his supervisor found him. Ramirez, your daughter's in the main office. Something about a disciplinary issue. You might want to head over there. The walk to the administrative building felt endless. Santiago's mind raced through possibilities, but he knew this was about the test. Clara had been so confident this morning, so prepared. What had gone wrong? He found his daughter sitting on a bench outside Director Diaz's office, her face a mask of controlled fury rather than tears. That was his girl. She'd inherited his tendency to turn pain into determination. Maija, he said softly, sitting beside her. Tell me. She failed me, Papa, I cheated. Said there's no way I could have solved those problems. Clara's voice was steady, but Santiago could hear the hurt underneath. She's writing a formal complaint for academic dishonesty. She wants me expelled. Santiago felt something inside him shift, like tectonic plates grinding against each other before an earthquake. He had accepted many indignities over the years, the dismissive looks, the assumptions, the casual disrespect. But this, attacking his daughter's integrity, this was different. Wait here, he said, standing up. Papa, what are you going to do? What I should have done 3 weeks ago. Santiago walked down the hallway to Ms. Vance's classroom with the purposeful stride of a man who'd made a decision. He knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. Ms. Vance looked up from her computer, her expression shifting from annoyance to disdain when she saw who it was. The custodial staff meeting is on Thursdays, Mr. Ramirez. You're in the wrong place. We need to discuss your accusation against my daughter. She laughed, actually laughed. Mr. Ramirez, I don't discuss academic matters with custodial staff. If you have concerns, you can make an appointment with the parent liaison. Though frankly, I'm not sure what someone like you could contribute to a discussion about advanced mathematics. Someone like me? Santiago kept his voice level, though his hands clenched at his sides. Let's not play games, Ms. Vance said, returning to her typing. Your daughter clearly received help on that test. The methods she used, they're not taught in any high school curriculum. They're not even in most undergraduate programs. Now, I don't know who she paid or how she got access to these solutions, but she didn't pay anyone. I taught her those methods. Ms. Vance's fingers froze over the keyboard. She looked up slowly, a smirk spreading across her face. You taught her advanced mathematics. She laughed again, harder this time. Mr. Ramirez, I've seen your employment file. High school diploma, no college listed. You've been cleaning these halls for 7 years, and you expect me to believe you taught her techniques I've never seen in 28 years of mathematics education. Yes, this is ridiculous. Please leave my classroom before I call security. The Ramirez principle, Santiago said calmly. That's what she used on problems 2, 5, and 8. It's an approach to elliptic curve problems that treats them as pattern recognition problems rather than pure calculation. I developed it during my doctoral thesis at ETH Zurich. The laughter died in Ms. Vance's throat. That's not. You can't just claim. Problem 11 used a variation of finite field analysis that I published in the Journal of Cryptography in 2012. Optimizing key exchange over finite fields using novel algebraic structures by St. Ramirez. You can look it up. Ms. Vance did exactly that, her fingers flying over her keyboard. Santiago watched as her face went pale, seeing his name, his credentials, his published papers appearing on her screen. This must be a different Santiago Ramirez, she stammered. Born in Sacramento, Granada, 1970. Bachelor's from University of Granada, Master's and PhD from ETH Zurich. Taught at University of Salamanca from 2005 to 2011. That's me. But you're a janitor, she whispered, as if saying it quietly would make it make sense. I'm a father first, Santiago corrected. A father who needed stable employment with good healthcare benefits when my wife was dying of cancer. A father who took whatever job would keep his daughter in the best school possible. And yes, a janitor, but also a mathematician. Ms. Vance stood abruptly, her chair rolling backward. This is impossible. If you really have a PhD, why would you? Why are you cleaning your classroom? Santiago finished. Because people like you made sure I couldn't do anything else. Because when universities talk about fit and culture, what they mean is they're not comfortable with Romani excellence that doesn't apologize for itself. I don't. That's not. Ms. Vance was backing toward the door. Now you failed my daughter, not because she cheated, but because you couldn't believe she was capable of brilliance. Just like the committee at University of Salamanca couldn't believe I deserved tenure despite my publications and teaching awards. Just like you can't believe it now, even with the evidence right in front of you. I need to speak with Director Diaz. Ms. Vance said, her voice shaking. Good idea, Santiago agreed. Let's go together. I have quite a bit to discuss with him. As they walked toward the director's office, Santiago noticed Ms. Vance kept glancing at him as if seeing him for the first time. The janitor's uniform hadn't changed, but suddenly it couldn't hide what it had always contained, a brilliant mind that had been dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated for far too long. They passed students in the hallway who stepped aside, sensing something momentous was happening. Santiago walked with his head high, no longer the invisible man who emptied their trash and mopped their floors. He was Dr. Santiago Ramirez, and he was done hiding. Mr. Ramirez, Ms. Vance said quietly as they approached the director's office, if what you're saying is true, then perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Santiago stopped and looked at her directly. No, Ms. Vance, there's been no misunderstanding. You understood exactly what you were doing when you humiliated my daughter, when you failed her for being too good, when you assumed her excellence had to be a fraud because of who her father is. The only thing that's changed is now you know who her father really is. He knocked on Director Diaz's door, but you know what? It shouldn't matter. She deserved your respect when you thought I was just a janitor. That's the real test you failed today. Director Isabella Diaz's office embodied everything Granada Heights Academy claimed to represent: excellence, tradition, and fairness. The walls were lined with photographs of distinguished alumni, and her desk, an imposing mahogany piece that had belonged to the school's founder, sat beneath a portrait of Queen Isabella I. Director Diaz, a 62-year-old woman with silver hair and kind but shrewd eyes, looked up from a budget report as her secretary knocked. Madam Director, Ms. Vance, and Mr. Ramirez are here to see you. They say it's urgent. Diaz noticed the unusual pairing immediately, her head of mathematics looking distinctly unsettled, and Santiago Ramirez, whom she'd known for 7 years as a reliable, quiet custodian, standing with a bearing she'd never seen before. Please sit. Diaz gestured to the leather chairs facing her desk. What brings you both here? Ms. Vance launched in immediately. Director Diaz, there's been a situation with Clara Ramirez. She submitted a test with impossibly advanced solutions, clearly indicating academic dishonesty. Which I can explain, Santiago interrupted calmly. Diaz raised an eyebrow. This was unusual. In 7 years, she'd never heard Santiago speak up in any meeting, let alone interrupt a department head. Mr. Ramirez, while I appreciate your concern for your daughter, academic matters are typically discussed. I have a PhD in applied mathematics from ETH Zurich, Santiago stated simply. I've been tutoring my daughter. The methods she used on the test are my techniques, methods I developed during my academic career. The silence that followed could have been measured in heartbeats. Diaz leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled, processing this information with the same analytical mind that had made her successful in education administration for 3 decades. Mr. Ramirez, she said slowly, are you telling me that you've been working as a custodian here, while holding a doctorate from one of the world's most prestigious institutions? Yes, Madam Director. And you've been tutoring your daughter in secret? Yes, Madam Director. Diaz turned to her computer and began typing. Santiago Teodoro Ramirez, published papers in, good Lord, she looked up, 12 peer-reviewed publications. The Ramirez principle for elliptic curve cryptography. You're that St. Ramirez? I am. Ms. Vance shifted uncomfortably. Director Diaz. Regardless of Mr. Ramirez's background, the fact remains that Clara's test performance was anomalous. She's never shown this level of ability before. Because you've never given her the chance, Santiago said quietly. You decided what she was capable of the moment you saw her, the moment you saw me. Diaz held up a hand for silence. She pulled out Clara's file, reviewing her grades, her entrance exam scores, teacher comments. Then she looked at Ms. Vance's grade book for the class. Ms. Vance, she said carefully, I'm noticing a pattern here. Clara's homework grades are consistently high, but her test grades in your class are surprisingly low. Yet in Mr. Herrera's physics class and Ms. Rossi's computer science class, she excels. How do you explain this discrepancy? Different subjects require different aptitudes. Mathematics is the foundation of both physics and computer science, Diaz interrupted. Mr. Ramirez, do you have any documentation of your tutoring sessions with Clara? Santiago pulled out his phone and showed photographs of the whiteboard from the old science lab, covered with complex equations and his daughter's work. I've been documenting our progress. These are from last night's session. Diaz studied the images, her expression growing more serious. This is doctoral level work. She's capable of it, Santiago said with quiet pride. When someone actually teaches her instead of trying to prove she doesn't belong. Diaz was quiet for a long moment, then made a decision. Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow morning, I will personally administer a test to Clara. Ms. Vance, you'll prepare the problems, new ones, not from any existing test. Mr. Ramirez, you will not have any contact with your daughter between now and then. The test will be conducted in my office with both of you present as observers. That's hardly necessary, Ms. Vance began. It's entirely necessary, Diaz said firmly. If Clara passes this test, not only will her original test grade be reinstated, but I'll also be conducting a full review of your grading practices, Ms. Vance. If she fails, we'll discuss appropriate academic consequences. She turned to Santiago. Mr. Ramirez, I'd also like to discuss your situation further. A man of your qualifications working as a custodian at this institution. That's something we need to address. With respect, Madam Director, I'm not looking for charity. I just want my daughter treated fairly. It's not charity, Mr. Ramirez. It's justice, and perhaps long overdue. Diaz stood, indicating the meeting was over. Tomorrow morning, 8:00 a.m. sharp. Ms. Vance, please have those problems ready and make them challenging. If Clara is half as capable as her father suggests, she'll need to be properly tested. As they left the office, Ms. Vance walked quickly away without a word. Santiago was about to return to his duties when Director Diaz called him back. Santiago, may I call you Santiago? Why didn't you ever tell anyone about your qualifications? Santiago considered the question. Would it have mattered? Would you have seen me differently if you'd known? Or would you have just wondered what was wrong with me that I ended up here? Diaz nodded slowly. Fair point, but things are going to change now. I promise you that. Walking back to find Clara, Santiago felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. Tomorrow's test would determine more than just a grade. It would challenge the very foundations of prejudice that had kept both him and his daughter in the shadows. He found Clara still waiting outside, joined now by Sofia Perez, who was holding her hand in support. Papa. Clara asked anxiously, what happened? You have another test tomorrow, Maija. Director Diaz will give it herself. But Papa, what if? No what ifs, Santiago said firmly. You're going to walk in there and show them what Ramirez excellence looks like. Not because I have a FD, not because of any titles or degrees, but because you've earned it, because you've worked for it. Because brilliance isn't about where you come from, it's about where you're going. That evening, they couldn't meet in the old science lab. The terms were clear. But as Santiago cleaned the hallways that night, he found himself humming an old flamenco tune his wife used to love. Tomorrow would bring either vindication or devastation. But either way, the truth was finally in the light. The morning sun cast long shadows through Director Diaz's office windows as Clara Ramirez entered at precisely 8:00 a.m. She had dressed carefully, her best uniform, hair neatly braided, her father's old ETH Zurich pen tucked in her pocket for luck. The office had been rearranged for the test. A single desk in the center, 3 chairs positioned for observers, and a video camera set up to record the entire session. Ms. Vance sat rigidly in her chair, a sealed envelope containing the test problems in her lap. Santiago stood by the window, having been instructed not to sit near his daughter or make any gestures that could be construed as communication. Director Diaz presided from behind her desk, with Mr. Lee from the school board, who had arrived unexpectedly, seated beside her. Mr. Lee learned about our situation and requested to observe, Director Diaz explained. Given the unusual circumstances, I thought an additional witness would be beneficial. Mr. Lee, a serious man with thoughtful eyes, nodded at Clara encouragingly. Don't be nervous, young lady. Just do your best. Ms. Vance, Director Diaz said formally, please present the test. Ms. Vance stood and handed the envelope to the director, who opened it and reviewed the contents. Her eyebrows rose slightly. These are quite challenging. Some of these problems are typically reserved for mathematics competitions at the postgraduate level. You said to make them difficult, Ms. Vance replied curtly. If she's truly as gifted as claimed, she should have no trouble. Diaz placed the papers face down in front of Clara. You have 2 hours. You may begin when ready. Please show all your work and explain your reasoning where applicable. Clara took a deep breath, thought of her father's words. Mathematics is just patterns and logic dancing together, and turned over the papers. The first problem made her pause. It was a complex proof involving number-theoretic transforms and their application in fast polynomial multiplication. Ms. Vance had clearly designed it to be intimidating, with multiple variables and nested conditions. But as Clara read it again, she recognized the underlying structure. It was similar to something her father had shown her, but twisted in an interesting way. She began writing, narrating her thought process as she'd been instructed. I'm going to approach this using the properties of convolution in finite fields. If we assume the circular property. Ms. Vance leaned forward, watching every pen stroke. Santiago remained perfectly still, though his eyes never left his daughter. 20 minutes in, Clara hit the second problem, an elliptic curve pairing problem that seemed unsolvable using standard methods. She sat back, thinking. Then she remembered something her father had said about transforming the problem space. I'm going to use a while pairing substitution here that might seem unconventional, she announced, then proceeded to transform the equation into something more manageable using the Ramirez principle. That's not a standard approach, Ms. Vance interjected. No interruptions, please, Director Diaz said firmly. Mr. Lee was taking notes, his expression intrigued. Please continue, Clara. Your reasoning is quite sophisticated. The third problem involved homological algebra, something most high school students never encountered. But Santiago had taught her to visualize abstract algebraic structures, to think of them as interconnected systems. This is about understanding the cohomology groups, Clara explained, sketching diagrams to support her work. If I can show that these complexes are exact. An hour in, she had completed 5 of the 8 problems. Her hand was starting to cramp, but she pushed through. Problem 6 was pure lattice-based cryptography, asking her to prove a statement about shortest vector problems. I'll use a combination of Babai's nearest plane algorithm and the LLL algorithm, she said, diving into an elegant proof that made Mr. Lee actually smile. Problem 7 nearly stopped her. It was a question about multilinear maps that converged to an unexpected value. She stared at it for 5 full minutes, aware of everyone watching. Then, like a flash of lightning, she saw it, the pattern hidden in the chaos. Oh, she exclaimed. This is related to the Bonin-Lin-Shacham signature scheme. If I reformulate it... Her pen flew across the paper, connecting concepts that most people didn't see as related. The final problem was the masterpiece of Ms. Vance's vindictiveness, a post-quantum cryptographic problem that incorporated elements of isogeny-based cryptography and lattice theory. It was the kind of problem that would challenge graduate students in cybersecurity. Clara had 30 minutes left. She read it once, twice, 3 times. She could feel Ms. Vance's satisfaction, certain this would be her downfall. But then she heard her father's voice in her memory. When a problem seems impossible, break it into pieces. Solve what you can solve, then see how the pieces fit together. She divided the problem into components, tackling each separately. The isogeny part yielded to a series of values formulas. The lattice section required finding a specific basis. The post-quantum portion. I'm going to use a supersingular elliptic curve here, she announced, applying a technique that most mathematicians didn't learn until graduate school. With 5 minutes remaining, she wrote her final answer, then went back to check her work. Finding a small arithmetic error in problem 4, she corrected it, then set down her pen. I'm finished. The room was silent. Ms. Vance grabbed the papers, scanning through them with increasing desperation. Her face cycled through emotions, disbelief, frustration, and finally, undeniable recognition that every solution was not just correct, but brilliant. Mr. Lee stood and walked over to review the work himself. This is remarkable. The maturity of mathematical thinking here. Director Diaz, this young woman is operating at a level I rarely see even in our advanced placement programs. It's impossible, Ms. Vance said weakly. She must have. There must be some explanation. There is, Santiago said, speaking for the first time. The explanation is that you've been so blinded by your prejudices that you couldn't recognize genius when it was sitting right in front of you. Director Diaz stood. Clara, you've not only passed this test, you've exceeded every expectation. Ms. Vance, I'd like to see you in my office privately after this. We need to discuss your teaching methods and grading practices. Furthermore, Mr. Lee added, I'll be recommending Clara for our district's gifted mathematics program. With proper support, she could be taking university courses by next year. Clara felt tears threatening to spill over. She looked at her father, who was beaming with pride that could have lit up the entire room. Mr. Ramirez, Director Diaz continued, I'd also like to discuss creating a position for you here at Granada Heights. Someone with your qualifications should be teaching, not cleaning classrooms. The atmosphere in Director Diaz's office shifted dramatically after Clara's test concluded. Mr. Lee had asked Clara to wait outside while the adults discussed the implications of what they had just witnessed. The young girl left reluctantly, but not before her father gave her a proud nod that said everything she needed to hear. Once the door closed, Director Diaz turned to Ms. Vance. Explain to me how you could have missed this level of talent in your classroom. The girl never showed this capability before, Ms. Vance stammered, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Or you never gave her the opportunity to show it, Mr. Lee interjected. I've been reviewing the records you submitted. Interesting pattern. Every Romani or North African student in your advanced class has grades significantly lower than their performance in other subjects would predict. Over the past 5 years, not a single minority student in your advanced classes has received higher than a B+, despite several of them earning A's in more advanced courses at local colleges while still in high school. That's purely coincidental. Is it? Santiago stepped forward, his voice calm, but carrying an edge of steel. Because I've been watching you for 7 years, Ms. Vance. I've seen how you treat students like my daughter. The subtle comments, the lower expectations, the surprise when they succeed despite your best efforts to ensure they don't. How dare you? How dare I? Santiago laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you what I dare. I dare to have earned a PhD from ETH Zurich with a 4.0 GPA. I dare to have published papers that advanced the field of cryptography. I dare to have taught at University of Salamanca until people like you decided I didn't fit the culture. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder he'd been carrying. Director Diaz, Mr. Lee, I'd like you to see something. He spread papers across the desk. His diplomas, his published papers, teaching awards, and finally, a letter from University of Salamanca. Diaz read the letter, her face darkening. They let you go despite stellar teaching evaluations and research output because of budgetary constraints and cultural fit considerations. The budget was the excuse. The cultural fit was the reason, Santiago said simply. And when I couldn't find another academic position, because somehow word spreads when you're not a good fit. I took this job because my daughter needed stability, good health care, and access to quality education. Even if that meant watching her be dismissed by teachers who couldn't see past my mop and bucket. Mr. Lee was examining the published papers. This work is exceptional. The Ramirez Principle. I've heard of it. Some universities are starting to incorporate it into their advanced cryptography curricula. You're that Ramirez? I am. Then why? Ms. Vance started, then stopped, the full weight of her assumptions crashing down on her. Why am I mopping floors? Santiago finished. Because people like you made sure that's all I could do. But you know what? I'm not ashamed of honest work. What I'm ashamed of is staying silent while you try to do to my daughter what was done to me. Director Diaz had been quiet, studying the documents. Finally, she looked up. Ms. Vance, I'm placing you on administrative leave effective immediately. We'll be conducting a full review of your grading practices and classroom conduct over the past 7 years. You can't. This is ridiculous. I've been teaching here for 28 years. 28 years of subtle discrimination is 28 years too many, Mr. Lee said firmly. Every student whose potential you've dismissed, every dream you've discouraged because it came in the wrong cultural packaging, that ends today. Mr. Ramirez, Diaz continued, I'd like to offer you a position as a special mathematics and cryptography consultant, effective immediately. You'd work with our advanced students, develop curriculum, and, she paused, help us identify and nurture talent that might otherwise be overlooked. Santiago was quiet for a moment. What about my custodial position? You want to keep cleaning? Diaz asked, surprised. No, but George has been my assistant for 4 years. He's got 2 kids in elementary school. If I take this new position, I want guarantees he gets promoted to head custodian with full benefits. Diaz smiled slightly. Done. Anything else? Yes. This isn't just about my daughter or me. I want a full diversity review of the advanced programs. I want unconscious bias training for all teachers. And I want scholarship programs for brilliant students whose parents might be janitors or bus drivers or work in any other job that people like Ms. Vance think makes them less worthy. That's a significant set of demands, Mr. Lee noted. They're not demands, Santiago corrected. They're necessities, because there are Claras in every school being told they don't belong, being made to feel small because of who their parents are or what they look like. That has to stop. Ms. Vance had been growing paler with each exchange. This is a witch hunt. I've done nothing but maintain high standards. Your standards weren't high, Santiago interrupted. They were exclusionary. There's a difference between challenging students and crushing them, between maintaining excellence and gatekeeping based on prejudice. I'll fight this, Ms. Vance said, standing abruptly. I'll go to the school board, the teachers' union. You'll do what you need to do, Mr. Lee said calmly. But know that everything will be investigated. Every complaint that was dismissed, every student who left your class feeling worthless, every grade that doesn't align with performance in other subjects. We'll look at all of it. As Ms. Vance stormed out, nearly knocking over a chair in her haste, Director Diaz turned back to Santiago. You could have told me years ago about your qualifications. I mean, would you have believed me? Or would you have wondered what was wrong with me, that I was pushing a mop? Would you have seen my PhD? Or would you have seen a problem to be solved? Diaz had no answer for that, and his silence was answer enough. The thing is, Santiago continued, I'm a good janitor. I take pride in my work. These halls are clean. The classrooms are maintained, and I've never missed a day, except when my wife was dying. That work has dignity. The only indignity was in how people treated me because of it. Papa. Clara's voice came from the doorway. She'd been allowed back in. Does this mean, are you going to be teaching here? It means, Santiago said, pulling his daughter into a hug, that you're going to see your old dad in a different role. But more importantly, it means that kids like you won't have to hide their light anymore. Mr. Ramirez, Mr. Lee said formally, I'd also like to invite you to present the Ramirez Principle at our next Regional Mathematics Conference. Paid, of course, with full recognition of your contribution to mathematics education. Santiago looked at his daughter, then at the director and Mr. Lee. I'll do it, but Clara presents with me. After all, she's the best proof that the method works. The next morning, Granada Heights Academy buzzed with rumors. News of Ms. Vance's administrative leave and Santiago Ramirez's revelation had spread like wildfire through the student body and faculty. As Clara walked through the main entrance, she noticed the difference immediately. Students who had never acknowledged her before were staring, whispering, some even nodding respectfully. Sofia Perez ran up to her, eyes wide with excitement. Clara, is it true? Your dad is like a genius mathematician, and Ms. Vance got suspended. Before Clara could answer, Liam O'Connell approached, his usual swagger noticeably diminished. My father says your dad went to ETA Zurich, says he's published famous papers. He paused, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. I guess I owe you an apology. You guess? Sophia said sharply. It's okay, Sophia, Clara said quietly. She looked at Liam directly. You don't owe me an apology for finding out my dad has a FD. You owe me an apology for treating me badly when you thought he was just a janitor. Liam's face reddened, and he walked away without another word. Meanwhile, in the faculty lounge, Santiago was experiencing his own transformation. Teachers who had barely noticed him for 7 years suddenly wanted to shake his hand, to tell him they'd always suspected he was more than he seemed. He accepted their congratulations with grace, but couldn't help noting who had genuinely been kind before and who was only friendly now. Dr. Elena Ortega, the physics teacher, was one of the genuine ones. Santiago, I have to say, this explains so much. Clara's intuitive understanding of mathematical concepts in my class. She gets it from you. She gets it from herself, Santiago corrected gently. I just helped her see what was already there. Director Diaz had called an emergency faculty meeting for that afternoon. The auditorium was packed with teachers, administrators, and several school board members present. Mr. Lee sat in the front row, his presence ensuring everyone understood the seriousness of the situation. Diaz began without preamble. We've uncovered systematic bias in our advanced placement programs. This isn't just about one teacher or one incident. It's about a culture that we've allowed to develop, where students are judged not by their potential, but by their parents' professions, their economic status, and yes, their background. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some teachers looked uncomfortable, others defensive. Effective immediately, Diaz continued, we're implementing several changes. First, all advanced program admissions will be subject to blind review. No names, no parental information, just pure academic merit. Second, we're bringing in Dr. Santiago Ramirez as our special mathematics and cryptography consultant to help redesign our curriculum and mentor both students and teachers. Santiago stood when introduced, still wearing his custodian uniform. He'd insisted on finishing his morning rounds before the meeting. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. I want to be clear, Santiago said, his voice carrying across the auditorium. I'm not here to lower standards. I'm here to remove artificial barriers. Brilliance doesn't come in just one package. It doesn't speak with just one accent or come from just one neighborhood. Our job as educators is to find and nurture that brilliance wherever it exists. From the back of the room, a voice called out. It was Ms. Carmen Robles, an older teacher who'd been at Granada Heights for 30 years. What about Ms. Vance? She's been a respected educator for decades. Mr. Lee stood to address this. Ms. Vance's case is under review. We've already received 21 complaints from former students, all minority students, who were discouraged or graded unfairly in her classes. Some of these students gave up on mathematics entirely, despite showing exceptional promise in other areas. He pulled out a tablet and read from it. One former student, now a successful cybersecurity analyst, wrote, Ms. Vance told me I should consider a trade school because people like me weren't suited for theoretical mathematics. I believed her for years until a university professor convinced me otherwise. I wonder how much further I could have gone if I hadn't lost those years to self-doubt. The room was silent. That evening, there was a special board meeting open to parents and students. The auditorium was standing room only. Santiago sat in the front row with Clara, surrounded by other parents who'd come to support them, many of them working class people who'd never felt welcome at Granada Heights events before. Ms. Vance arrived with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man, who immediately began talking about wrongful suspension and defamation, but his aggressive stance softened when Mr. Lee presented the evidence. Years of grade disparities, documented comments, and a clear pattern of discrimination. My client maintains she held all students to the same high standards, the lawyer stated. Then explained this, Mr. Lee projected data onto a screen. Over the past 5 years, not a single Romani or North African student in Ms. Vance's advanced classes has received higher than a B+, despite several of them earning A's in more advanced courses at local colleges while still in high school. The data was damning. Parents began murmuring, some angry, others shocked. One parent stood up. Dr. Miguel Sanchez, a prominent neurosurgeon whose daughter had graduated 2 years prior. My daughter, Anna, was told by Ms. Vance that she didn't have the aptitude for advanced mathematics. She's now at the University of Barcelona, studying biotechnology with a 4.0 GPA. How many other children did you rob of their confidence? Another parent, Joanna Lopez, wearing her hotel housekeeper uniform, having come straight from work. My son, Mateo, stopped believing in himself after your class. He said if the teacher didn't think he was smart enough, maybe he wasn't. Do you know what it's like to watch your child's light dim because someone with authority told them they weren't good enough? Ms. Vance's lawyer tried to interject, but the testimonies kept coming. Student after student, parent after parent, sharing stories of dreams deferred and potential dismissed. Finally, Clara stood up. The room quieted. Ms. Vance, she said, her voice clear and strong. You didn't just grade me unfairly. You tried to make me believe I was less than I am. You used your power to make me feel small. But what you didn't know was that every night in a forgotten classroom, my father was teaching me not just mathematics, but something more important, that my worth isn't determined by your prejudice. She paused, looking directly at her former teacher. I feel sorry for you, because while you were so busy trying to prove I didn't belong, you missed the chance to teach something amazing. You missed the chance to change a life for the better. Instead, you chose to be small, and that's not my failure. It's yours. The room erupted in applause. Ms. Vance's face was ashen, her carefully constructed justifications crumbling under the weight of testimony. The school board voted unanimously to terminate Ms. Vance's contract and implement comprehensive reforms. As people filed out, many stopped to shake Santiago's hand or hug Clara. The janitor, who was a genius, and his brilliant daughter had changed Granada Heights Academy forever. 3 months had passed since the revelation that shook Granada Heights Academy to its foundations. The February morning was crisp and bright as Santiago Ramirez walked through the main entrance, no longer in his custodian's uniform, but in a professional suit that his daughter had helped him pick out. Yet he still arrived early enough to chat with Georgie, who now wore the head custodian badge with pride. How's the new job treating you, Professor? George asked with a grin, using the title the students had spontaneously started calling Santiago. It's Doctor, not Professor, Santiago corrected with a laugh. But the kids can call me whatever makes them comfortable. And Georgie, you're doing excellent work. These halls have never looked better. The transformation at Granada Heights was remarkable. The walls now featured displays celebrating diverse mathematicians and scientists, not just the traditional European figures, but brilliant minds from every background. A new banner in the main hallway read, "Excellence has no single face." Amada director Diaz had adopted after extensive discussions with Santiago and Mr. Lee. Santiago made his way to what had been Ms. Vance's classroom, now redesigned as the Mathematical Innovation Lab. The rigid rows of desks had been replaced with collaborative workstations. Whiteboards covered every wall, and in the corner sat a small library of advanced texts that Santiago had donated from his personal collection. Clara was already there, working with a group of students on problems for the upcoming National Mathematics Championship. The team was notably different from previous years. Alongside children of doctors and lawyers sat the daughter of a taxi driver, the son of a restaurant worker, and twins whose single mother worked 3 jobs. All brilliant, all previously overlooked. "Morning, Papa," Clara called out, then turned to her teammates. "Remember what my father always says. Mathematics is a language, and everyone can learn to speak it fluently." Santiago observed with pride as his daughter led the problem-solving session. She'd grown in confidence, no longer the girl who'd stood trembling at the board. She was patient with struggling teammates, encouraging without condescension. She'd learned from both the best and worst examples of teaching. At 9 o'clock a.m., Santiago had his advanced seminar, a new class created specifically to challenge the school's brightest mathematical minds. 20 students filed in, their excitement palpable. Among them was Mateo Lopez, whose mother had spoken at that board meeting. After Mies Vance's dismissal, Mateo had been retested and placed in advanced mathematics, where he was now thriving. "Today," Santiago announced, "we're going to explore the beauty of lattice-based cryptography. But first, I want to share something with you." He pulled down a projection screen showing a photograph. A younger Santiago at ETH Zurich, standing next to his thesis advisor, both smiling after his successful defense. "This was the day I earned my PhD," he said. "I thought it would open every door. Instead, I learned that sometimes the world isn't ready to see you for who you are. But here's what I want you to understand. Your worth isn't determined by other people's limitations. It's determined by your willingness to persist, to grow, to lift others as you climb." The students listened intently as Santiago began the lesson, weaving together mathematics and life lessons in a way that made both more meaningful. He taught them the Ramirez principle, but more importantly, he taught them to question, to explore, to see patterns not just in numbers, but in the world around them. During lunch, Santiago was surprised to find Evelyn Vance waiting outside his office. She looked different, humbled, smaller. Somehow, the arrogance replaced with something that might have been genuine remorse. Dr. Ramirez," she began hesitantly. I wanted to apologize." Santiago studied her for a moment, then gestured for her to sit. "Go on." "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past months. Taking the required sensitivity training, yes, but also really examining my beliefs, my actions." She paused, struggling with words. "I was wrong. Not just about Clara, but about so many students over the years. I let my prejudices blind me to potential, and I caused real harm." "Yes, you did," Santiago said simply. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I'm volunteering at the community center, tutoring kids from underserved neighborhoods. Pro bono. I'm trying to make amends, I suppose. I know I can't undo the damage, but maybe I can prevent someone else from experiencing what your daughter did." Santiago was quiet for a long moment. "Ms. Vance, redemption isn't my gift to give. That's between you and the students you hurt. But I will say this. Recognizing the harm is the first step. The work of repair is lifelong." She nodded, stood to leave, then turned back. "Your daughter's brilliant, you know. Even through my prejudice, I should have seen it. I'm sorry I didn't." "She was always brilliant," Santiago replied. "You just finally learned to see it." That afternoon, the state mathematics championship team had their final practice before the competition. Director Diaz stopped by to wish them luck, accompanied by Mr. Lee and a surprise visitor, Dr. Isabel Fuentes from ETH Zurich's mathematics department. "Dr. Ramirez," she said warmly, shaking Santiago's hand. "I've been following the innovations you've implemented here. ETH Zurich would like to offer you a visiting professor position. You could split your time between the university and Granada Heights." Santiago looked at Clara, who was beaming with pride, then at his team of diverse, brilliant students. "I appreciate the offer, Dr. Fuentes, but my work here isn't finished. These students, this community, this is where I'm needed most. Though perhaps we could arrange for some of my students to attend lectures at ETH Zurich." "Even better," Dr. Fuentes smiled. "We'll create a pipeline program. Your top students can take university courses while still in high school with full credit." As the day wound down, Santiago stood in his classroom, watching the sunset paint the walls gold. Clara joined him, carrying the team's practice scores. "We're going to win state, Papa. I can feel it." "You already have," Santiago said softly. You stood up to injustice. You found your voice, and you're helping others find theirs. That's the real victory. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sofia Perez entered with her parents, her father still in his mechanic's overalls, her mother in her nurse's scrubs. Dr. Ramirez, Sofia's mother, said, "We wanted to thank you. Sofia's always been good at math, but since you started teaching here, she's been inspired. She says she wants to be a cryptographer now, like you and Clara." "She has the talent for it," Santiago assured them. "And more importantly, she has the determination." As the Perez family left, Santiago noticed Georgia in the hallway, emptying trash bins with the same dignity Santiago had once brought to the task. They exchanged nods, two men who understood that honor came not from titles, but from doing necessary work with pride. The evening brought one final surprise. The entire mathematics team, their parents, and several faculty members had organized a small celebration in the Innovation Lab. A banner read, "Thank you, Dr. Ramirez, for showing us that brilliance has no boundaries." Director Diaz raised a glass of sparkling cider. To Santiago Ramirez, who reminded us that education isn't about gatekeeping, it's about opening gates, who showed us that wisdom can come from unexpected places, and who proved that sometimes the best teachers are those who've had to fight to learn. As everyone cheered, Santiago felt his wife's presence somehow, knowing she would have been proud. He'd lost his university position, yes, but he'd found something more valuable. A chance to change not just individual lives, but an entire system. Clara stood beside him, no longer the frightened girl who'd been humiliated at the board, but a confident young mathematician ready to take on the world. "Papa," she whispered, "we did it." "No, Maija," Santiago replied, pulling her close. "We're just getting started." Be part of our community and share in these heartwarming stories. Just hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you can start your day with inspiring lessons and heartfelt moments.